PB.
From American experience, he was just 14 when they came in the middle of the night and took him away forever.
This was either the last straw or maybe it was the spark.
The murder of Emmett Till on American Experience.
Join us tonight at 10 here on OPB.
You ever feed a 2-year-old? They take all the food and they roll it up in a ball, then they hand it to you. Hey, Dad, you want some?
Funny.
Our freedom of speech is freedom of death. We got to fight the powers that be.
Innovative.
Muhammad Ali has won by a knockout.
I told you, I'm the champion of the world.
Triumphant.
Singing the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last.
Courageous.
Free at last.
Celebrating the African American legacy, past, present, and future.
Next time on Frontline, the client.
I trusted one of the largest accounting firms in the world.
The pitch.
They told me this was a bulletproof deal.
The firm.
The penalties paled in comparison to the revenues that would be generated by this tax shelter.
The payoff.
They can create these products for thousands of dollars and sell them for millions.
The problem.
Corporations saved billions in taxes, and the rest of us are picking up the tab for it.
Tax me if you can. Watch Frontline.
Thursday night at 9 here on OPB. Funding for local broadcast of this program has been provided by viewers like you and by the following. Key, through McDonald Investments, a Key Core company, and member NASD NYSE SIPC, providing personalized financial planning and investment management. Key.
This is OPB.
Funding for local broadcast of the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by viewers like you and by the following.
D.A. Davidson & Company, a financial services firm serving investors since 1935.
Good evening on this President's Day holiday. I'm Jim Lara. On the NewsHour tonight, our summary of the news. A look at the violent uprising in Haiti. A report on the National Institutes of Health drive to change medical research. The last debate and the latest news on tomorrow's Democratic primary in Wisconsin. And a conversation with the author of The Man Who Walked Between the Towers, an award-winning children's book.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by
the SBC companies. 125 years of sweat, of building networks, of getting the job done. After 125 years, we are just getting started. SBC, going beyond the call.
See it start. See it grow. See it develop. See it questioned. See it considered. See it evolve, change, adapt, and finally, see it succeed. Need financing for your idea? At CIT, we see what you see.
And by the Archer Daniels Midland Company.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Roadside bombers killed 2 U.S. soldiers in Iraq today, one in Baquba, the other in Baghdad. Elsewhere in the capital, a grenade explosion killed an Iraqi child playing near a school. Also today, a U.S. Army general said Iraqis, not foreign fighters, were most likely behind attacks Saturday on security compounds in Fallujah. 20 people died in those assaults. Brigadier General Mark Kimmett spoke today at a briefing in Baghdad.
There were initial reports that some of the people either wounded or killed were of foreign nationality. I think that probably was some of the initial reports that came in. I can tell you that the reports that we've gotten from the 82nd indicates that they were all Iraqi citizens. That may turn out not to be the case after the investigation, but right now the sensing of the commander on the ground was that these were all Iraqi citizens.
Kim had said investigators believe the raid may have been staged to free 4 Iraqis being held in connection with an earlier bus attack. Dozens of prisoners were freed during the battle. In Haiti today, former paramilitary troops were sighted among insurgents trying to oust President Aristide. Local residents told reporters they'd seen 2 well-known exiled leaders in the northern town where the rebellion began 10 days ago. One was a former police chief accused of plotting a coup in 2002. The other was the former head of the Army's death squad, who fled the country in the mid-1990s. Up to 50 people have been killed in clashes between the rebels and pro-government forces, and we'll have more on the Haiti story right after this news summary. President Bush made the case for his economic record today in Florida, while Democratic presidential contenders campaigned against it in Wisconsin. The Democrats crisscrossed Wisconsin today on the eve of its primary. Kwame Holman has our campaign report.
President Bush visited a window factory in Florida to highlight what he says are the favorable impacts of his tax policies on small business. Flanked by business owners and an employee, the president renewed his call for Congress to extend his tax cuts, and he tried to cast the Democrats as tax hikers.
You hear people in Washington saying, oh, let's not make the tax cuts permanent. When you hear somebody say that, they're saying we're going to tax you. We're going to raise your taxes. You'll hear some discussion about what that means for a family when their taxes go up. But from an economic perspective, I'm telling you, now is not the time to raise the taxes on the American people.
Meanwhile, Democratic frontrunner John Kerry took on the president's economic policies today. He kicked off a 4-day jobs tour around the country in Wausau, Wisconsin.
Deficits going up $1 billion a day, 2 jobs lost every minute in the United States, and this president's top priority is to give the wealthiest people in the country yet another tax cut at the expense of almost every other choice that we ought to be making.
In Milwaukee, John Edwards also criticized the president's record on the economy.
We cannot continue to have this trade policy that's shipping millions of jobs overseas. And I don't know how many of you saw this, but just a few days ago, I guess about a week and a half ago, the White House came out with their economic report, you know, and they're talking about how great the economy's doing. They're talking about Wall Street. They're talking about CEOs. They're not talking about real people. They're not talking about Main Street. They don't have a clue.
And Howard Dean focused his fire on President Bush today. He appealed to Arab American voters in Milwaukee.
We think that politics has nothing to do with us, but it has everything to do with us. This president's economic policies have been ruinous for America. He's cut taxes, but most ordinary Americans hardly got a tax cut. They saw their costs go up.
Dean is winless after 16 state contests, but insists he'll keep running. His national campaign chairman left the team today after urging Dean to quit the race if he loses in Wisconsin tomorrow.
Dennis Kucinich also campaigned across Wisconsin today. Al Sharpton was in New York and had no public events scheduled. All 5 Democrats participated in a debate last night in Madison. We'll have excerpts from that later in the program. Dozens of same-sex couples waited in pouring rain to be married in San Francisco City Hall today. Despite the government holiday, municipal offices opened an hour early to accommodate the demand. 1,700 marriage licenses have been issued to gay and lesbian couples since Thursday, when Mayor Gavin Newsom authorized city officials to grant them. 2 state courts will hear arguments tomorrow from opposition groups suing to stop the same-sex unions. Spirit, the robotic Mars rover, was on a roll today, covering 88 feet on the planet's rocky terrain. It's en route to a crater called Bonneville, where it will search for signs of water. The Spirit has another 800 feet to travel to reach the crater. On the other side of Mars, the rover Opportunity was also looking for evidence of water. It was digging in a deposit of hematite, the iron-bearing mineral which typically forms where water is present. India and Pakistan opened their first formal peace talks in nearly 3 years today. The nuclear-armed neighbors hope to lay the groundwork for discussions on the disputed province of Kashmir and preventing nuclear accidents, among other things. Pakistani President Musharraf and Indian Prime Minister Vajpayee agreed to the talks last month when they held a sidebar meeting at a regional summit in Pakistan. The World Health Organization and the United Nations said today it could take months, even years, to eliminate the deadly bird flu in Asia. Officials from both organizations were in India attending an emergency meeting of Southeast Asian nations about the disease. Also today, Thailand found the virus in 8 new regions, and 2 new cases were diagnosed in humans. And that's it for the news summary tonight. Now it's on to the violence in Haiti, medical research reform, the Democratic primary in Wisconsin, and a winning children's book. Ray Suarez has our Haiti story.
Once again, the impoverished Caribbean nation of Haiti is caught up in political bloodshed. For 2 weeks, rebel groups have been attacking and sometimes capturing cities and towns. The rebels say they want to oust President Jean-Bertrand Aristide, accusing him of betraying promises to run a democratic government. The threat to Aristide is the strongest and most violent since he was returned to power nearly a decade ago by the United States. Haiti's 4th largest city, Gonaïves, is under rebel control. Fighting has spread since early February to 11 other towns. The death toll has reached at least 50. So far, the capital, Port-au-Prince, has remained relatively calm, with displays of opposition in the form of mostly peaceful protests. The rebels have looted and torched police stations and erected flaming roadblocks. One of their self-proclaimed leaders said Haitians are losing patience with their economic condition. Some 80% of the country's 8 million people live in poverty. The country is the poorest in the hemisphere and among the poorest in the world.
We are here to secure the population and help feed the people. We can't feed everyone, but we are trying. The people are suffering because there is no transport to bring food in. The people must wait until President Jean-Bertrand Aristide leaves.
Fighting back are pro-Aristide gangs called Chimères and the country's 5,000-member police, the only national force since Aristide disbanded the army. They claim to have regained control of several towns, including the northern port of Cap-Haïtien.
The situation is good for us. We don't want to see the opposition. Whenever we see anybody from the opposition, we want to cut off their heads and burn their houses down.
Aid agencies have warned the fighting has hampered the delivery of fuel and food to many Haitians. International donors, including the U.S. and European Union, suspended aid after flawed parliamentary elections 4 years ago. The country has been functioning without a parliament since last year, and the main political opposition has refused to participate in new elections until Aristide resigns. But he has said he will serve out his term, which ends in 2006.
I call on my brothers who are in the opposition to stop that violence, to start dialogue, realizing that we don't have any other way to solve the political crisis if we don't want to have dialogue, consensus, compromise, so democratic and peaceful way to move ahead.
Aristide is a former Roman Catholic priest. He was first elected in 1990, winning a landslide with massive support from the poor. But that brief experiment in democracy after 3 decades of dictatorship and military rule ended in another coup. But in September 1994, as a U.S. invasion fleet awaited offshore, a U.S. delegation appointed by President Clinton that included Jimmy Carter and Colin Powell persuaded the military leaders to leave and Aristide to return as president. And it was Secretary of State Powell on Friday who asserted that the United States would not tolerate a coup in Haiti. His comments followed a meeting with Caribbean officials.
We all have a commitment to the democratic process in Haiti, and we will accept no outcome that is not consistent with the Constitution. We will accept no outcome that in any way illegally attempts to remove the elected president of Haiti.
Powell's comments followed assertions earlier in the week from administration officials indicating the U.S. would not play a military role in this latest Haitian crisis.
Needless to say, everyone's hopeful that the situation, which tends to ebb and flow down there, will stay below a certain threshold, and that we have no plans to do anything. By that I don't mean we have no plans. Obviously we have plans to do everything in the world that we can think of. But there's no intention at the present time or no reason to believe that any of the thinking that goes into these things year in and year out would have to be utilized.
Meanwhile, the rebels insist they'll only stop their fight when Aristide steps down. For more now on the developments in Haiti, we get two views. Alex Dupuy is a professor of sociology at Wesleyan University, specializing in development, the Caribbean, and Haiti. Born in Haiti, he's now an American citizen. And Robert McGuire is director of the Haiti program at Trinity College in Washington, D.C. He's consulted on Haiti and Caribbean issues for both government agencies and non-governmental organizations. Professor Dupuy, the last time Haiti was regularly in the news in the United States and featured large in our foreign policy might have been almost 10 years ago now when, with the help of American troops, President Aristide was restored to power. What happened between that optimistic time in the mid-90s and now to lead Haiti back to where it is again?
Well, basically, the problem stems from the crisis in 2000 brought about by the parliamentary elections of May 2000 and the presidential elections of November of that same year, where the OAS had observed the balloting of May 2000 and found that 7 seats were wrongly assigned to the ruling party, up to the party of President Jean-Bertrand Aristide, the Lavalas family party. And the OAS demanded a rerun of those 7 seats in the second round, but the then Independent Electoral Council refused, and the government of President Préval also refused to reverse the ruling of the CEP. And as a result, the OAS boycotted the second round of the parliamentary elections and also the presidential elections of November. The opposition parties coalesced into the Democratic Convergence and later into the Civil Society Group of 184, refused to recognize the legitimacy of the entire elections and not just the 7 seats. And also, because they boycotted both the second round and the presidential elections, they refused to recognize Aristide's re-election as president of Haiti. And since then, they have been calling for Aristide's resignation from office, and basically have been unable to, or unwilling rather, to enter into a serious negotiation with him to resolve the crisis peacefully. Aristide, for his part, where I think he went wrong, was to have recourse to his armed gangs, the supporters known as the Chimères, to basically intimidate the opposition. And the fact that he used violence led to a spiraling crisis, basically a violence met by more violence on the opposition side and more violence on the part of Aristide's supporters. And despite efforts by the OAS to mediate the crisis from 2000 on, they have not been able to bring the two parties to the table. The opposition parties, for their part, were supported by the United States, in mainly the International Republican Institute and the USAID, which supported them, and also they received some funding from the European Union. And as a result of that, they saw no need to really enter into negotiations with Aristide, because the U.S. made it clear to them that they would not recognize an outcome to the conflict that did not include the opposition parties. So in that sense, even though they represented, if you will, at the time, a minority of the population, they really had no incentives to enter into a serious negotiations with Aristide.
Let me turn to Bob McGuire at this point.
Okay.
You've got Aristide's National Police Force, and as Professor Dupuy mentioned, his irregular gangs on the street. Now the rebel side of the equation is attracting new armed men and growing larger in some of these provincial cities. Is this a country on the verge of all-out civil war?
Well, certainly there's regional areas where there's a potential, and for what we're seeing now is civil war. These gangs that are now fighting against the government, at one time some of their members were allied with the government, but Mr. Aristide, I think under some international pressure, had begun in last summer to try to reel in some of these gangs. And the brother of one of the gang leaders in Go Naive was murdered, allegedly, at the hands of Mr. Aristide's government. And this sent some of those gangs that had been loyal to him against him. Joining those gangs now, as the piece demonstrated that we showed before our interview, was the fact that you have some nefarious characters coming over from the Dominican Republic who are well armed and have military experience, and this could change the calculus of the situation.
Well, is Aristide someone who is able to regain control of the situation, run a Haitian government that has effective day-to-day civil control of the country?
At this point, I think, Ray, that's questionable. The country is so deeply polarized, so deeply split. I think that maybe Mr. Aristide has to take some very dramatic action to indicate that he can have the credibility that he needs for others to engage him and to move forward. You know, the opposition, as Alex mentioned, has not really engaged Mr. Aristide in trying to resolve this crisis that emanated out of elections in 2000. But then again, Mr. Aristide has not fully lived up to some of the things that he said. So I think he does have a bit of a credibility problem with the opposition. And it seems to me that there is an onus on Mr. Aristide to make some dramatic action now. And he has pledged some action to the group of Commonwealth Caribbean nations, the CARICOM group. On February 1st, he met with representatives of CARICOM in Jamaica. And coming out of that is something that's being called the Kingston Plan, which is where Mr. Aristide would reel in the gangs. He would support the resumption of negotiations with his opponents to create an interim governing council that could name a prime minister and that could lead the country to some kind of elections, with Mr. Aristide maintaining his role as president, and that the national police would be supported. The police would be built up again. I think that it's now somewhat the responsibility of the opposition to respond to this as well. And Mr. Aristide has agreed with CARICOM that he will do these things. It might be very helpful, however, if Mr. Aristide would demonstrate some action to do something to give confidence to everyone else that he will move forward.
You noted in your opening remarks, Professor Dupuy, that the United States has begun to pull back on its support for the Aristide government, yet at the same time, in the last couple of days, Secretary of State Powell said the United States will accept no outcome that attempts to remove the elected president of Haiti. So while they don't support him, they also don't support him being removed?
Well, that's correct. This is the first clear policy we've heard from the Bush administration on the situation in Haiti. Up to Friday's statement by Secretary of State Powell, the Bush administration had in fact been sending very mixed signals to both the opposition and to President Aristide. As I said before, throughout the negotiations, the U.S. always blamed President Aristide for the breakdown in negotiations, when in fact the opposition also had a role to play in that. As Bob McGuire mentioned, Aristide does suffer from a credibility problem with the opposition, and that's justifiable because of the violence that his supporters have meted out to the opposition members. But nonetheless, the opposition also has refused to negotiate seriously with Aristide, and as a result, both sides have been locked into a sort of a dialogue, if you will, of the deaf, where they're talking past each other. No one wants to listen to the other side. That said, it is a welcome statement by Secretary of State Powell to suggest that the resolution of the crisis must be done through peaceful negotiations and rather than through violence, because as you mentioned in your opening statement, President Aristide has said that he will not resign. He will carry out the remaining of his 5-year term, and the opposition needs to be pressured by its supporters, principally in this case the United States, to also come to the negotiating table. Otherwise, the violence will continue to spiral and indeed bring Haiti on the brink of a civil war. So there is no viable alternative to negotiations. And at this point, I believe that even though President Aristide was certainly wrong to have had recourse to the violent gangs who support him, it is difficult to imagine that he would seriously crack down on those gangs when, in fact, he's now facing an uprising not only by former gang members who supported him at one point, as Bob mentioned, but now joined by former members of the defunct Haitian army and the paramilitary death squads that were allied with the military during the 3 years of Aristide's of the coup d'etat against Aristide. So the only way to resolve the crisis is for the U.S. not only to bring pressure on President Aristide to make goodwill gestures towards the opposition, which he must do, but they also need to put pressure on the opposition to realize once and for all that only a negotiated solution can bring an end to the crisis.
Is the United States indispensable in intervening in this at this point? Do you share this?
Absolutely, Ray. The U.S. is an indispensable actor, and I would very much agree with Alex that the political calculus that changed in Washington after 1994 really did hurt the Clinton administration initiatives that restored Mr. Aristide. There were constraints put up against those initiatives almost immediately after the Republicans took the House of Representatives in '94. And it was in part perhaps to undermine Clinton policy, but it ended up undermining Haiti. And Mr. Aristide and the Haitians were pretty much left to their own devices as the U.S. had a policy of, no mission creep, no nation building, and a quick exit strategy. We're seeing that, particularly those chickens coming home to roost when it comes to the Haitian National Police. That began as a very, very positive initiative in bringing police under civilian control, strengthening the police force, and getting some good people in there. I still think there are remnants of those good people in there, but that force is beleaguered, it's corrupt, and it might be outmatched by some of these commandos that have come in.
Bob McGuire, Professor Dupuy, thank you both.
Still to come on the NewsHour tonight, changing the ways of medical research, the Democratic presidential race in Wisconsin, and an award-winning children's book. The medical research story. It's reported by Susan Denser of our health unit, a partnership with the Henry J. Kaiser Family Foundation.
Well, Lipitor did it. My cholesterol's way down.
Cholesterol-lowering drugs like Lipitor are a key weapon in the war on heart disease. That's the leading cause of death among Americans. But this advance in medical care was a long time in coming. In 1973, two scientists at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, Drs. David Brown and Joseph Goldstein, first unlocked the secret of how cells obtain and use cholesterol. 12 years later, they won the Nobel Prize for their work. But it wasn't until 1987 that the first cholesterol-lowering drug came on the market. And it took 14 more years before government guidelines recommended that as many as 36 million Americans should be taking these drugs. That's too long, says Dr. Elias Zerhouni. He's director of the National Institutes of Health.
We have to have accelerated strategies and find ways where the benefits of the laboratory research get translated much more quickly from the laboratory to our patients.
So Zerhouni has spearheaded an effort to speed up the process, starting at NIH.
I thought it was very important for us to be open and be completely willing to self-examine NIH and say, what is it that we should do better?
Under Zerhouni's leadership, NIH officials recently consulted with more than 300 of the nation's top researchers in academia, government, and the private sector. The result of their deliberations is a new NIH plan called the Roadmap. It's a proposal to re-engineer the way much science is done, not just at NIH, but also at thousands of university and other labs across the United States. The NIH, based in Bethesda, Maryland, is a division of the Federal Department of Health and Human Services. It's the nation's and the world's largest biomedical research agency, with a mission to protect and improve human health. In reality, the NIH isn't one entity, but rather a collection of 27 institutes and centers.
Some of them are dedicated to fight cancer, heart disease, and some are dedicated to find out about different life stages of life, like aging. We have a National Institute for Aging. We have a National Institute child health and human development, and some are dedicated to basic research.
NIH's budget comes entirely from the government and will total $28 billion this fiscal year. A small slice of that money pays for research within the institutes themselves. The vast majority is given out in grants and contracts to roughly 220,000 scientists working at universities or other labs in the U.S. Zerhouni says NIH must help the entire scientific establishment seize new research opportunities. Many of those stem from the sequencing of the human genome, a largely NIH-funded project that was completed this year.
We know now that there are 33,000 genes in the human genome. Those 33,000 genes code for 1 million different molecules, different proteins. In each cell of our body, we have over 1 million different proteins interacting with each other.
And that means potentially billions of gene or protein malfunctions may be found to cause or contribute to disease. So Zerhouni says scientists need new tools to help them understand these processes and devise potential treatments. One example is a proposed new molecular library at NIH. At a cost of $125 million, it's designed to aid scientists who are experimenting with drug treatments.
Each of these plates has 384 compounds in it.
Dr. Chris Austin of NIH is overseeing efforts to build the library. He says it will be a database of information about how more than 500,000 different chemical compounds interact with human proteins and disease cells.
So if we're interested in cancer, for instance, we'll go to the library and we'll pull all those books down one at a time, all those compounds, 500,000, and then we'll test them for activity in a certain kind of cancer. And we'll learn that there are maybe 5 or 10 which work for that application, for that particular disease.
Information about how all these compounds interact with different proteins and cell types will be gathered with the help of high-tech robots. Zerhouni says both the data and the chemical compounds themselves will be available for free to scientists around the world.
What we want is a library that every scientist could have access to easily, so they don't have to spend years trying to do the research and accelerate the cure that way.
Ideally, scientists will then be able to isolate more promising new candidates for drugs. Those can then be developed by private pharmaceutical companies. Once new drugs are identified, they must be tested on thousands of patients in so-called clinical trials. So another part of NIH's roadmap would dramatically accelerate the pace and scope of these tests.
Hi, Kathy. How are you?
Dr. John Gallen heads NIH's clinical center.
We can do better, and that's what the roadmap is all about, is to make it go faster, enable us to do studies in large numbers of patients, and to translate that quickly into something that can be used as a drug.
One of the reasons
Gallen says a major problem facing biomedical research is that too few patients are willing to participate in clinical trials.
We're going to check this.
So NIH's new roadmap calls for an unprecedented effort to recruit thousands of community physicians and their patients into clinical research.
That means that doctors out in the field will get some special training on how to do clinical research, and yes, they will become part of the team that will enable us to broaden our access to the patient populations in the country. My goal is that 90% of all the patients who have diseases will be participating in clinical research as part of their care.
The last major thrust of the roadmap is designed to change the way much scientific research is carried out. The old model is that of solitary scientists working alone in their labs. The new model is this research team working in the magnetic resonance imaging lab at NIH.
Here we're looking at pictures of our patient's heart, and you can see all 4 heart chambers.
The team is attempting to better understand the heart's mechanics. It's a multidisciplinary team composed of a cardiologist, a physiologist, a computer scientist, and an engineer. On the day we visited, Zerhouni, a radiologist by training, joined in as well. The team has demonstrated that these advanced MRI techniques work better than traditional methods in diagnosing heart attacks quickly. They say those results have only been possible because they work together.
You live together, you live the problem together, and you bring the different approaches, the mathematical approaches, the engineering approaches, the clinical problem, which may be the focus of a lot of our attention. And having those people living and working together, I think, is really the key to solving the problems rather than trying to extract it from abstract literature references, if you will.
Zerhouni says the roadmap will now pave the way for much more team science like this in the future.
What we want to do is stimulate scientists from different fields to come together in different ways. So we're going to fund interdisciplinary research centers and ask every university out there and every scientific group to come up with new ways of exploring science.
So far, NIH's roadmap has received generally good reviews from scientists, federal policymakers, and members of Congress. But a recent report from the National Academy of Sciences warns that the roadmap initiatives will need far more funding in 2005 and beyond. And the warning comes at a time when President Bush has proposed a slim 2.6% increase in NIH's budget for fiscal 2005. Zerhouni acknowledges the challenges, but says drawing up the roadmap was the crucial first step. He says it's now time to test whether it can help spark dazzling new findings in science and then translate them into new treatments for patients.
Now the Democrats in Wisconsin. First, their debate last night, which aired on WTMJ-TV in Milwaukee, not Madison, as I said in the news summary, by the way. Kwame Holman reports.
The first subject addressed at the Milwaukee debate was President Bush's Vietnam-era record of service in the National Guard. The first question went to front-running Massachusetts Senator John Kerry, a Vietnam combat veteran.
The White House released the president's full military records late Friday night. And a fellow Guard officer from Alabama has now stepped forward to say he distinctly recalls the president reporting for duty in Alabama. Does that end the issue of whether the president fully served out his National Guard requirements?
That's not something that I'm qualified to comment on. I have not looked at the records. I haven't seen the records. I'm not reading the records. It's not for me to make that judgment. I think that all of us today are very proud of those who serve in the National Guard.
Do you think your party and certain members of your party should drop this as an issue?
I have suggested to some people who are my advocates who've gone that line of attack. It's not one that I plan to do. It's not one I have. I don't plan to do that, and I've asked them not to. But the president has to speak for his own military record, and those of you in the news media obviously have asked questions about it, and that's where I'll let it sit.
North Carolina Senator John Edwards was asked whether the president's honesty is a legitimate campaign issue.
Yes, it is. Absolutely it is. Because this president has said one of the most critical things, not only for a candidate for president, for the president of the United States, is his integrity, whether he can be trusted. We're in the middle, as you know, of starting an investigation, an independent investigation, about why there's a disconnect between what the American people were told by the president and others and what's actually been found in Iraq. Now, I think integrity, character, are critical issues in any presidential campaign.
The Reverend Al Sharpton and Congressman Dennis Kucinich agreed, also asserting the president was not honest about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
If he didn't know he was lying and was lying, that's even worse. Clearly, he lied. Now, if he is an unconscious liar and doesn't realize when he's lying, then we're really in trouble. Because absolutely it was a lie. They said they knew the weapons were there. He had members of administration say they knew where the weapons were. So we're not just talking about something passing here. We're talking about 500 lives.
The president lied to the American people.
And why would he do that?
Well, you know what? I can't speak for the president, but I can speak as the next president of the United States to say that I intend to bring those troops home by going to the UN and giving up control of the oil, letting the UN handle that on an interim basis on behalf of the Iraqi people, letting the UN handle the contracts. The United States must renounce privatization.
Kerry again was challenged on his vote to authorize President Bush to go to war against Iraq.
This is one of the reasons why I am so intent on beating George Bush and why I believe I will beat George Bush. I said specifically on the floor of the Senate that what I was voting for was the process the president promised.
Kerry's answer went on for minutes.
The process was to build a legitimate international coalition, go through the inspections process, and go to war as a last resort.
The answer prompted this from Edwards.
That's the longest answer I ever heard to a yes or no question. The answer to your question is, of course. We all accept responsibility for what we did. I did what I believed was right. I took it very, very seriously. I also said at the same time that it was critical when we got to this stage that America not be doing this alone.
And Edwards reminded Kerry he hasn't yet won the Democratic nomination.
And by the way, Senator Kerry just said he will beat George Bush. Not so fast, John Kerry. We're going to have an election here in Wisconsin this Tuesday, and we've got a whole group of primaries coming up. And I, for one, intend to fight with everything I've got for every one of those votes.
Former Vermont Governor Howard Dean, who in the past has criticized Kerry for having ties to Washington lobbyists, last night passed on the opportunity.
The Bush-Cheney campaign now has an anti-John Kerry ad on its website about John Kerry and special interests. It is entitled Unprincipled. Are you and the Bush campaign sounding the same theme about John Kerry?
I think George Bush has some nerve attacking anybody about special interests. Not only has he funded his campaign through special interests, but George Bush is systematically looting the American Treasury and giving it to his friends, the pharmaceutical companies, the HMOs, and the insurance companies.
There also were several questions about jobs. Wisconsin has lost thousands of them, and the role of trade policies.
You voted for a lot of these trade deals, NAFTA with Mexico and permanent trade relations with China. Given all the jobs that have fled to China and Mexico, would you vote the same way today?
There's been a dramatic shift in the world in what has happened to jobs over the course of the last few years. Perhaps 3 or 4 years ago, I began talking about how it is critical that in any trade agreement, we now need to negotiate labor and environment standards. I will order a 120-day review of all of our trade agreements.
No regrets about those votes.
And I regret the way that they haven't been enforced. Sure.
Senator Edwards, let me just turn.
Edwards used the trade issue to separate himself from Kerry and Dean.
You know, Senator Kerry is entitled, as is Governor Dean, to support free trade, as they always have. The problem is what we see happening, and it's NAFTA, which I opposed, plus a whole series of other trade agreements, have been devastating here in Wisconsin. Nobody has to tell me what the effect is of some of these bad trade agreements.
On the eve of the Wisconsin vote, polls show Kerry well ahead of his Democratic rivals.
And to Catherine Skiba of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel for more on tomorrow's Wisconsin primary. Catherine Skiba, welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening. First, give us a quick profile of a Wisconsin Democrat.
Well, Madison is sometimes called, the state capital is sometimes called the last liberal boutique left in America. But I think outside of Madison, you would find a Wisconsin Democrat looks much like a Democrat elsewhere. Perhaps instructive is looking at our 2 Democratic U.S. senators. Herb Kohl is a centrist. Russ Feingold, of course, is a much more liberal senator. And those are the 2 gentlemen that Wisconsin sent in to represent them in the Senate.
Okay, now
What's interesting.
Excuse me. In the primary tomorrow, it's an open primary, is it not? Not just if any a Republican or an independent can vote as well, right?
It's an extremely open primary. One not need to declare whether they're a Democrat, independent, or Republican. And we also have same-day registration to encourage turnout. So you can show up tomorrow morning with a driver's license or the last 4 digits of your Social Security number, and you can vote. And you know, if you're a Republican, you can vote Democratic, and vice versa.
What is the
turnout is?
Yeah, excuse me. I was going to ask you what the interest has been and what you expect the turnout to be.
Turnout is expected to be 1.6 million. And that's about 45% of the eligible voters. I should note the Republicans are having a primary too, and George Bush is the only candidate on that side.
So a Republican can come into the polling place and vote on the Democratic side. That's what you're saying, right?
Absolutely.
So when you say 45%, you're talking about 45% of the total eligible electorate, not just 45% of the Democrats?
That's right, total. And what's driving these figures are, it's also a primary day for very key races in the state. The mayor of Milwaukee, the largest city in the state, Milwaukee County Executive, there's a primary in that race, and there's a hot referenda, for example, a gambling issue in Madison. So those issues and races will also be bringing people to the polls.
What, in the Democratic presidential race, what have been the driving issues in Wisconsin?
Voters here tell us they're very concerned about the economy. Wisconsin's job base is disproportionately high in terms of manufacturing jobs, maybe about up to 19% of the state workforce. People are very concerned about post-war Iraq. Even though we don't have a heavy presence of military bases, the figure I saw was that we have approximately 1,000 guardsmen and reservists in Iraq and Afghanistan. And of course, the post-war Iraq situation is troubling to all Americans, or many Americans, I should say.
Has there been, excuse me just one sec. Has there been any polling on the war itself and the way President Bush administration has handled the war and the post-war as far as polling in Wisconsin?
Well, one survey I saw, and it was at the end of December. However, it was done, I think, just before Saddam Hussein's capture, showed that for the first time in many, many months, Bush's approval rating had dropped below 50% to 48%. So there is concern about the president's handling of the economy and Iraq and other issues.
Which of the Democrats have spent the most energy, time, and resources in Wisconsin?
Well, if you look at TV ad spending, it's a person who's no longer in the race, General Clark, who spent the most in terms of airtime, $370,000. Edwards has spent $316,000. Next is Kerry at $263,000. And Dean, despite this huge last-ditch internet appeal that he needed so much money to make a stand and try to get a win in Wisconsin, has spent about $227,000. They have the ground war since in the last week, since voters in Tennessee and Virginia spoke, has been very active. They've been campaigning up and down and all across the four corners of the state. And we've had the debate certainly drew interest, and a number of the candidates appeared Saturday at a Democratic Party Jefferson-Jackson Day. About 1,000 showed up. It was an event, I would note, that Howard Dean skipped to attend his son's last hockey game as a senior.
Was there a Howard Dean? Is there a Howard Dean movement in Wisconsin, and was there ever one?
I think Howard Dean was hoping against hope, sad to say. Certainly it's true Wisconsin has sent mavericks to Washington. Bill Proxmire comes to mind, and one of the pioneers of the entire primary movement, Bob La Follette, at the turn of the last century, comes to mind. But, you know, they're the exception, not the rule. And you know, I guess if you'd like to work in the White House, you have to be confident or display confidence. But let's face it, he's been winless in 16 primaries and caucuses. Winning begets winning, and you need only go to Lambeau Field in the fall to show that Wisconsin likes winners, too.
That's where the Green Bay Packers play.
It's the home of our beloved Green Bay Packers.
Right. The Kerry's big lead, is there any reason to question that in the polls?
Well, what the political observers have been saying is, absent a major gaffe or scandal, it's he's the winner tomorrow, and I see no reason that won't happen. The numbers are very strong. He has brought about 40 full-time staffers to the state, campaigning vigorously. He didn't write Wisconsin off. He says he's fighting state by state, and made himself available for Wisconsin voters to take a look at.
Why Kerry? Why has Kerry done so well? Once they saw him, what was it they liked about him?
Again, I don't know that Wisconsin is any different than the rest of the country. I will say that, as in other places, the ABB movement is alive here. Anybody but Bush. And in a polite way, our governor, Jim Doyle, a Democrat, said that to me yesterday before the debate. He's not endorsing. He said, I've known many of these men for quite a while, and I would like our party to be united and unseat the president. I think...
so they just think that Kerry has a best chance of beating Bush in November?
That's what the voters in the polls have shown.
Mm-hmm. Oh, all right. Well, Catherine Skibaugh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Finally tonight, a conversation about an award-winning book for children, and to arts correspondent Jeffrey Brown.
Once there were two towers side by side.
The two towers at the World Trade Center are no more, but a new book for children by Mordecai Gerstein brings them to life by evoking a fantastic and actual moment in their history. the man who walked between the towers tells of the day in 1974 when a young Frenchman named Philippe Petit, aided by friends, disguised himself as a construction worker, used a bow and arrow to send a strong cord across the expanse of the two towers, and then walked a quarter of a mile up in the sky for almost an hour. Petit was arrested, but a judge sentenced him to perform in parks for children. The book has been awarded the 2004 Caldecott Medal, given by the American Library Association for the most distinguished American picture book for children.
You know, when you make a mark on a piece of paper, one line, you create a whole new world.
Mordecai Gerstein, age 68, lives and works in Northampton, Massachusetts, and travels often to schools. Here, Stony Brook School in Kinnelon, New Jersey. He's written and illustrated more than 30 books for children.
Mordecai Gerstein, welcome and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
This is a book about a magical moment in the history of the World Towers. Why, after 9/11, did you want to write this for children?
Well, 9/11 made me think about the towers, and the fact that I lived in New York for a long time while they were being built. In fact, I had a studio that was ripped out along with the whole neighborhood to put the towers in. I saw them go up. I lived with them, running past them in the morning, and they were like part of my furniture. And when they went down, I started to think about the towers, and I remembered Philippe Petit's walk, and remembered that I used to see him perform on the street back in the 70s at that time, and that he was a brilliant street performer, great juggler, great unicyclist. He did amazing things. And when the towers went down, I remembered Philippe's walk. I found an old New Yorker with a profile of him in it, and I started to write the story.
Did you feel it was important to address children on this particular subject somehow?
Writing for children is that's my medium, you know, and the medium is the picture book, which is a very particular kind of book. And I try to give children what I would give anybody, you know. I become interested in something, I find something fascinating, it has to fascinate me, and then I want to give it to them.
You really play up the whimsy and the sense of play and the sense of freedom.
I love this aspect of what Philippe does. I mean, he's a trickster. He defies the kind of reality. He defies the possible. He does the impossible. He does the amazing. And when he does that, it's an act of such optimism. You know, when you walk out there, that's very optimistic, you know, that you're going to make it to the other side, and he does.
But at the same time, this sense of mischief, which is in the children's book, is balanced against this tragedy in the background that we all know about.
Right. Well, another aspect of doing the book is celebrating the towers and doing something about them for kids that showed what they were like, that showed what it was like to live with them, you know, and what they felt like, and how big they were. And because the image that we're left with now, when you think of the towers, you know, it's the image of them burning, you know, the image of the smoke coming out of them, and you don't see them otherwise, you know. Kids haven't seen them that way, you know, as they were. And so this book celebrates that too. So it celebrates the towers, I think, and also this remarkable event and this remarkable man.
Why don't you read a little bit for us so we get a sense of this walk in the sky that you've written about?
Great, I'd love to. Philippe put on his black shirt and tights. He picked up his 28-foot balancing pole. All his life he had worked to be here, to do this. As the rising sun lit up the towers, he stepped out onto the wire. Out to the very middle he walked, as if he were walking on the air itself. Many winds whirled up from between the towers, and he swayed with them. He could feel the towers breathing. He was not afraid. He felt alone and happy and absolutely free. A woman coming from the subway might have been the first to see him. Look, someone walking on a wire between the towers. Everyone stopped and looked up, They gasped and stared. It was astonishing. It was terrifying and beautiful. A quarter of a mile up in the sky, someone was dancing.
Someone was dancing in the sky.
Yeah. I just think that's wonderful.
The other day you read this to children in school. What was their reaction?
They sat there open-mouthed and with delight and amazement. And the question always is this really true? Did this really happen?
It's a little hard to believe, huh?
Yes, yeah, it is. But they just drink it in.
But how do you reach younger children? What do the words have to do? What do the pictures have to do?
I think the words have to be clear and direct. I think the pictures have to be engaging and full of feeling. And I think everybody's going to be able to relate to it, children and I want older people too, to be able to connect with what I do.
But aside from the fact that it is illustrated, you don't see a big difference between writing for adults and writing for children.
Essentially, no. I want to do something beautiful. I want to do something amazing and that's full of wonderment and that's going to provoke good questions.
The book is The Man Who Walked Between the Towers. Mordecai Gerstein, thank you, and again, congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.
Again, the major developments on this President's Day. Separate roadside bombs killed 2 U.S. soldiers in Iraq. An Army general said weekend attacks, initially attributed to foreigners, appeared to be the work of Iraqi insurgents. In Haiti, exiled former paramilitary leaders were seen joining insurgents intent on ousting President Aristide, and dozens of same-sex couples were married at San Francisco City Hall. Opposition groups go to court tomorrow to stop them. We'll see you online and again here tomorrow evening, excuse me. Have a nice holiday evening. I'm Jim Lara. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by...
Years ago, some predicted a nutritious meal today would look something like this. But ADM believes breakthroughs in nutrition will continue to come from nature, like heart-healthy alternatives with foods made from soy, even vegetable oils that help you curb fat and lose weight. If we are what we eat, the future is looking beautiful. ADM. The nature of what's to come.
And by CIT and SBC Communications.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Purchase video cassettes of the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer. Call 1-866-678-NEWS.
We are PBS.
Funding for local broadcast of the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by viewers like you and by the following.
D.A. Davidson & Company, a financial services firm serving investors and families since 1935.
Funding for local broadcast of this program has been provided by viewers like you and by the following. Key, bringing together innovative financial capabilities, including commercial banking, investment banking, and asset management to help businesses reach their goals. Key.
From American experience, he was just 14 when they